welcome everyone back to Easing the Reader, a Wheel of Time reread. And we are, I think I said it last time, the Great Hunt is winding down. Or actually, I think last time I said the Great Hunt is on once again, because it kind of was. My name is Chris Mary Hultman, and with me I have my companion, David Green. I didn't really know what to reference. Constant guest? No, I don't know. My sidekick.
Companion is fine. I'm happy with that. That's great. Thank you.
My own very own Red.
Yeah, why not? Why not? We've had an upgrade. We both have Leandrin looking over our shoulders, and with us as well for the first time is Rebecca from Reading the Passing.
Thanks for having me.
We're very excited that you're on. I love your channel, and we were both on an episode discussing the Great Hunt pretty much on the Dusty Wheel, and then I was like, please come on the show, please.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I still get people. I was on the Dusty Wheel again recently, and I still got a few messages saying, "Do you still hate the Seanchan?" And it's like, I don't hate the Seanchan.
Just cut them.
Just get rid of them. No, it's funny actually reading this bit. I was reading it, and I was kind of thinking, would I still cut them? And I was like, you know what, I might. No, I won't. So. Rebecca, why don't you tell us a little bit for people that don't know who you are and your channel? Why don't you tell us a little bit about Reading the Pattern?
Sure. So Reading the Patterns, my YouTube channel. I've been doing it now for like a year and a half or so. I started off initially, I was focused on doing a reread of The Wheel of Time. So I have done condensing chapters. I talk about themes and character development. I get into the foreshadowing. It's very spoiler heavy. And I've broken down the Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and New Spring. And I'm taking a little pause from that. I'm going to come back to it later with The Dragon Reborn, but I've been doing a lot of content for the Wheel of Time TV show. And I've also, gotten into doing looking at other types of fantasy adaptations and how to, sort of apply that to the Wheel of Time and just how to adapt these books, because I'm trying to really focus on those readers who are very hesitant about changes that are coming to the TV show.
Your adaptation videos are great. I really enjoy them because I'm working on a screenplay adapting someone's work at the moment. And it's not something that I'm particularly invested in. Like, not saying that, I'm not interested. I've never read it before. It was like a job that came in. I was like, okay, and it's difficult even at that stage where it's something that you don't have these feelings where you've not read it for 20, 30 years in some cases. So to do something that has such a big following and probably the people, and we know that the people that are working on the show are big fans, it must be heart-wrenching at some points to do it. So
absolutely,
your videos are great because you actually just look at it and go, well, this is what could happen. Prepare yourself for this.
Yeah, it's like, well, what kinds of changes are made? Why are they made? And how can we use that to kind of help us, know what to expect? And sometimes it's scarier and harder to deal with in the abstract, and then when you look at it and it's all coming together, you see these adaptations that work, but if you just pulled it apart and said like, well, this big change happened, people would be like, I hate it. So
yeah. So how do you? There's not a huge amount of confirmed information about the show. They're being, as we were talking about before we came on, they're being super secretive about a lot of stuff. But there is the stuff that we have seen. We do know there is some subtle and big changes, like Tom's guitar. We know from the leaked kind of code on Brandon Sanderson's photo that Master Hightower dies. I think that's pretty much confirmed.
Yes. Yep.
And even stuff like when at the Dusty Wheel where they unblurred the script, the Shadar Logoth is going to go down in a different kind of way. So how are you feeling about the show with these kind of little changes that we know about so far?
Yeah. So I feel like I am so deep into like the detail and the weeds of all this production stuff. Like I know most fans are not digging into it that deeply. I've also done like, where I follow, the news and things that like WatchSeries.com reports and Geeky Airy does on her channel, where she talks about everything that's going on in the production. And so like putting all those pieces together, I feel like I've been speculating for so long now about, okay, well, looks like they're changing this and they're doing this. And like, I've done breakdowns where I think, well, this is what I think is going to happen in these episodes based on all this information. So I'm so deep into it. I feel like I'm really kind of prepared for all kinds of changes, which I know like a lot of people aren't. So that's why I like kind of shifted into talking about like adaptations, because if you're not that deep into it, you might not be prepared for some of those changes, and it might be harder to accept. So I'm kind of excited because we've read these books and they're there and they're always there for us to go back to, but it's exciting to see different takes on it. And I know a lot of fans, have probably heard this idea, but, another turning of the wheel is how I look at the show. It's like we're imagining the wheel going around again, and the third age has come back around again, and things are playing out just a little differently.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. So
And that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah. Oh, I think we talked about this once before on the show, but I mean, is there a risk of, and I'm going to say, being blinded by fandom? Because I can look, if we compare to the Shannara TV show, which we can all agree was horrible, or even the Earthsea TV show that we again can all agree was not a great adaptation. And I'm thinking now, I was an Earthsea fan, not a Shannara fan. So, I mean, obviously, me feeling that Shannara was horrible was probably closer to, what I probably would have anyway. But I mean, is there a risk of being blinded by like the whole lore and mystique of Wheel of Time, and like actually accept something that in the end isn't actually that great?
I thought about that, and my feeling is like, if it's just not good, it'll be obvious like that it's just not good, and it might be hard to accept for those of us who have been really hyped about it, but at that point, like, there won't be anything you can really say, right? Like and so that could certainly happen. I'm not too worried about it, but it certainly could happen. And I think there's maybe more risk as time goes on. I felt like that because I was a Game of Thrones fan. Season 7, which wasn't great. At that point, I was ready to like defend it because it had been great up until that point. And then season 8, it's like, no, this is not good. And so you look backwards and you go, you know what, it wasn't that good last season either. But you're into it and you want it to be good. But I think I'm more focused on if it is good, like sort of objectively, to whatever extent it can be objective good, it's bringing in new fans, and it's well done, but it's just different. And so fans of the books don't like it because it's too different. That would bum me out a lot. So that's what I'm really hoping, that we can be prepared to look at it for its own thing, and that it will be good in its own way.
Yeah, like looking at it with an open mind, because like we talked on this show before that I'm a huge Tolkien nut. Like I read everything Tolkien multiple times, and looking at Lord of the Rings movies, the Peter Jackson ones, as an adaptation, they don't adapt it's not lavish to the books.
No.
And the Two Towers in particular is very, very different to how things shake out. But the great adaptations, because it keeps the spirit of the Lord of the Rings, it improves in certain areas. And that's, but if you looked at it from, read the books, and I have my closest friend from childhood just can't watch the films because he's like, they're nothing like the books. It's different. I just can't get my head around it.
Adaptations aren't for everyone. Some people just are not going to enjoy them, and if that's how, if you know that about yourself, then, it makes sense to skip it. I'm actually, so that's the video I'm working on next, is like a breakdown of Fellowship of the Ring and the kinds of changes that they made, and looking at that through that lens for Wheel of Time. Because I agree exactly with how you said about those movies. They're more different than people think, because they do feel like Lord of the Rings, and there's a lot that's captured. And they're roughly faithful, to the extent that adaptations can be. but there's more differences than people think.
Yeah. I saw your thing on YouTube today about your question, maybe it was yesterday, about saying hopefully more Fellowship of the Ring and less Radagast Brown in the Hobbit.
Yes, please.
Well, I think, but Peter Jackson has also detailed why he made those changes, why those changes are there. I mean, he was always very candid with people and explaining, this is why we're doing it this way, and this is what we're doing it, and then there'll be an extended version that you can watch on DVD if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, things have to change. I mean, well, I know that it's almost a cliche at this point because it gets said, but it's true. There are books and TV and film are very different mediums, and with books you do get that extra bit. Sorry, with TV you do get that extra bit of time to spend and really kind of sink into the world, into the tapestry of the world and everything. You can have slower scenes. Like, I mean, I don't know if you've been watching Falcon and Winter Soldier.
No, I don't have Disney Plus.
Okay. So I mean that one, like, comparing that, I mean, it's not an adaptation, well, it kind of is, but like comparing that to the movies, for example, there's scenes where it's just people stood in the kitchen talking about their family history, and which you wouldn't be able to do more in the movies because it's a shorter running time. So you're able to slow it down in TV, but still, even then TV to books, it's still very, very different. But then the other wrinkle that comes into it is that with on the book we're discussing today is a book that came out 31 years ago, and times have changed, and it needs to reflect that as well.
I think Rafe Judkins, from what he said, like, he gets that, right? Like, he understands that, like, Jordan had certain intentions or how he wanted, his work to be perceived at the time, and that, you want to maintain that intention, that heart of it, even though things are different now. And if you just took it exactly as written, it wouldn't have the same effect now as what he was going for. So
yeah. And I think that's the thing that is going to be less the changes to things. I think most fans that I've seen are kind of accepting that, like, things might be a little bit different, the events might be differently, but there seems to be more vocal voices about the kind of themes being updated, which I'm hoping that kind of dies off a little bit, because it's 2021, like, it has to reflect that we're in to an extent. Yeah.
Well, you can be like Alan Moore and say that the graphic novel is the perfect medium and it's never change.
Right. Don't do anything else.
No, he hated all. I mean, he hates all the adaptations of his work into movies.
Yeah.
And just has to sit back and watch it happen because he sold the rights. That's the thing. But you can also see Watchmen has a lot of issues. I mean, even though it's almost like a frame by frame copy of the book, it does have a lot of issues because it's not timely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So, in terms of the TV show, before we jump into the Great Hunt, there's not been a lot of news recently since we've gone. We were joking the last time we come on, because usually whenever we come onto a video, something happens the next day. And it's like 2 weeks before we can talk about it, and everyone's kind of...
I saw that, you guys, last time you were like, oh, we're gonna miss it, and then it's like, nope, here we are, still nothing.
Still nothing's happened. It's been very, very quiet, but well, one definite change that we saw yesterday was the Twitter account changed their name to The Wheel of Time, which was interesting. I think a poster might be on the way out or something.
Something is coming. It does seem like that, because if they're going to start putting out things that are going to be marketed more widely beyond the existing fans, that would be a reason to change it, because then people are looking for the Wheel of Time, and they're going to find that more easily than what on Prime. So I think something's coming soon.
Yeah, and we've seen, we kind of knew from reports that filming was going to kick off again at some point in April, but then thanks to Instagram and people putting up little stories and then removing them almost as quickly, we saw that some of the key actors are back in the Czech Republic. Which is great, and I don't know. Did you see Yosha's picture from the set? That looked very trailer. Yeah, it looked very Tywin's Gap to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it does seem like they maybe still need to do that, so that's quite possible.
Yeah, but that's pretty much all there is.
That's the news.
That's it.
I hate to have a news Wheel of Time news video.
Oh, we could. I mean, you know, when something happens, people are able to like talk for about 4 hours about the smallest of things. So
5-second videos. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Why do you, Rebecca? Why do you think? I mean, you've been studying like everything to do with the TV show, and you go into a lot of detail on your channel, which we will link below in the comments. And obviously, if you're here for the first time, anyone who's watching, please subscribe and give us a like as well. We'd really appreciate it. But why do you think there is so much secrecy at the moment with the Wheel of Time? Not even at the moment, since day one, really, since it was announced. It was.
I mean, I can think of sort of basically, two reasons. I mean, one is they have learned somewhat, right? So there was less secretive before, or there were more leaks before. They may have been trying to be secretive, but they weren't, keeping hold of all that. And so just because things have leaked that they weren't happy about, and they have had to clamp down on some kinds of things, I think that's part of it. But I'm sure they were, even from the beginning, trying to keep things secret. And it's probably because, they've seen with, shows like Game of Thrones that, they had to get there. They had to get extremely secretive. And with an existing fan base, as they're learning how crazy Wheel of Time fans already are, I think they were at least somewhat prepared that, people are going to try to get every detail they can find.
So they're kind of protecting their assets as much as they possibly can for a big review.
I mean, from what I can tell, it seems like they're more upset about things like, there's pictures of actors in costume, raw, very raw, not even footage, but just like, someone taking a video with their cell phone or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that they don't like, because it's, they're working on what's going to be a final product that has all the polish they want to put on it. And when that's out there and it's not even close to being final form, I understand like that people don't necessarily get the right impression of what they're putting out there. And I think that's the kind of stuff that's been more upsetting to them. They probably maybe don't love the casting leaks, especially if they were big ones, but there haven't been any big ones really. But I think that's the stuff that bothers them more, I understand it.
Kind of remember the wolf leak.
Yeah, that one I think was one they didn't like, and probably similar things like there were photos of Yosha and Madeline, and what looked like Faldara sets.
Yeah, that was a strange one though, because they were obviously the wolf one wasn't particularly well received by a lot of people, because people see it and they think, oh, it's the first footage, and they're expect. I think they're in their heads expecting something like almost like the finished product, but it was clearly something they were just trying on the set that day to get it right. But like at least the ones with Rand and Egwene in Faldara, it looked good. Like it looked. I mean, I especially like the stance for the one where it kind of looked like the Lord of Chaos cover, which made me laugh.
Oh right, I love that.
But no, it looked great. Like, and I think the fans really enjoyed seeing that, because it was, wow, this looks like an expensive set, and it looks exactly how a lot of people would have imagined it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't see it as harmful, but I can understand why they don't want things like that out there, because they're trying to, give people the best first impression they can of what they're doing.
Sure, yeah. I showed Chris those pictures, and he was just like,
yeah.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Well, should we jump into to the book?
Yeah.
The book. So the wheel, the Great Hunt is spinning back up again. It's not winding down, really, isn't it? It's
kind of going out of control.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we start with one point, Ram's point of view, and then we quickly switch to the ladies. And basically, it just feels like it was in Eye of the World. This seems like this could have been one long chapter. The women, I mean, there's a lot of cause for jumping around. There is a little bit in the middle, but I mean, it's interesting. I mean, at least we should talk about what happens to Rand.
The flip. Yeah, this is This is one of my favorite chapters in all of Wheel of Time.
Me too.
I would say that it was very, yes, and I would agree. So far, it's my favorite, just
But
because I like that, because we get something very similar to what happens to Nynaeve when she is tested, where it's just like scenes kind of like happening,
mhm,
possible futures, or alternative futures, or alternative realities,
yeah,
whatever it might be. And I think it's really well done. And I like the kind of like dialogue between Rand and the Dark One.
mhm, yeah. Like it's a real, even like for my own kind of writing, this chapter is a real like touchstone for me for when I'm trying to do something that is abstract. I suppose I always go back and read this chapter as just to refresh how Robert Jordan did it, because he gets away like. And I went back to read this again the other day, for this, and in my head it's always this big epic long chapter that's like,
Yeah.
but it's actually it isn't. It's very very brief.
Same. I think it's longer than it is. I think you see more than you see. It's funny how that works. Yeah.
Yeah, because like even because it's clever the way that he does it, because each kind of flicker, the paragraph, also the section, I suppose, becomes larger with each flicker,
Mm.
which is really kind of well done, because that adds to that weight of it, I suppose. And then that whole ream where it goes through the hundreds of different lives, the pace of it is so good. The kind of yeah, it's a fantastic chapter, and I just love all the reactions of everyone else when they all come to it.
Yeah, I like that too. I was going to say that at the end, when you sort of see how these different other characters have reacted to what they've seen, you don't know what they've seen, but you still can get a sense from the onslaught that Rand has experienced, that they've seen something similar. And that's kind of just, it's intriguing to like look at the other characters and how they've responded when you don't know exactly what they saw.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a nice little bit of foreshadowing with some of the characters,
Hmm.
and what I like about this bit as well, because I'm a big I know we talked about this on the Dusty Wheel. I'm a big fan of Matt, but I just don't like him in this book. And this is kind of
Same.
yeah, this is kind of like starts the redemption of Matt in my eyes a little bit in
Mhm.
this one. So maybe a little bit, because he still is. He's still.
Yeah, for me, like in the first couple books, he has some moments where like you can glimpse the Matt that's in there that we haven't gotten to know yet.
Mhm.
But yeah, he's not very likable in the first couple of books for me. But once you like him, once you really kind of understand Matt more, it's very different.
I wonder if it was that was because I know what Robert Jordan's trying to do with Matt in these couple of books. Where he's obviously he's getting kind of corrupted with this
Hmm.
the dagger, and then like the after effects of it's not really been healed from him yet. Um, but I just wonder if if he kind of reflected himself and was like, I think I may have gone too far with him, because he's almost not a different character in the third book, but he almost, even when you compare him to how he is at the very start of the Eye of the World,
Hmm.
he almost is a different character in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it, I mean, he does go through some pretty intense experiences in the first couple of books. I mean, we just don't really get the full sense of it because we don't have his point of view. But I agree, who he is at the very beginning is just very immature. And then, so when we really start to get into his POV, he has progressed some because he's been through those things and he does seem different. It's just we didn't get to really like see him
Yeah,
fully go through it. So
yeah.
it does feel like, oh, this guy's different.
Chris, I like to ask Chris some questions every so often, because
Hmm.
it amuses me more than anything, really, just to kind of see what you think. So, what do you think is the deal with Verin at this stage?
I would like to know that too.
What is?
What I think, because I think you've asked me this before,
Hmm.
right? And I really haven't had any opinion because I don't think about Varen as such. Um, to me, it's, yeah, and I would probably say that is still kind of like the same and don't really care about that character. It doesn't bring me. It's not interesting. It's yeah. I would say that is probably. I don't really think of it. It's a side character that is there. It doesn't really engage me in any way.
But you're all about Ingtar, though, aren't you? That's probably
I do. I'm a big proponent of Ingtar, and I do think, like they say, I think in this chapter, Ingtar should have the horn. Give it to Ingtar. He wants it.
well.
That he does.
He definitely does. He's all about it. But like should you give someone that wants so much power? Should you give them that power?
Well, you know what he'd do with it.
Do you though?
He's just going to kill a bunch of trolls.
He would kill some stuff, probably.
Yes.
He would love to.
No, but I guess the problem for me here at this point with Baron is that it's not dimensional enough. Ingtar isn't either very 3D. He's a very flat character, but I do understand what he wants and his needs.
Okay.
Whereas Baron, I think it's kind of cloud shrouded in the mystery. I don't really know what that character is all about and what they want.
Okay.
And if in some way there's supposed to be I'm supposed to the meaning, the point being is that I'm supposed to be interested in what they're all about. It's not working.
Okay, fair enough. That's fair enough. We'll have to see how that progresses through the rest.
We'll revisit this topic.
We'll revisit it. Yeah. So the chapter basically they've gotten where they need to go, and then we jump back to see what's going on in the White Tower, and what always makes me laugh in this bit is just like, oh, the king in Karahine's dead as well now. They're all just the civil war.
we were talking about the Bechdel test. A couple of last time the women were on.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Bechdel test, and this chapter is horrible.
Yes.
For that.
They're just talking about men.
They talk about Galad and Gawain
and Rand.
It's like, what was the point of this chapter? The chapter is that it's like, feels like the point of the chapter was to show that the girls are thirsty for men.
Wow.
And I'm sorry, but yes, this chapter did nothing for me.
Maybe this is one of those things that needs to be updated in the TV show a little bit, because you are right in a way that the first thing that when they were introduced to them in the scene, they're all in Egwene's room and they're all just talking about Gawain with his shirt off. And
I know.
all the other Sedai go to watch him.
It was just like they're having a sleepover. It's like they're having a sleepover, an old-fashioned American teen movie sleepover.
What do you think about that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I was trying to remember, if there was anything else really like noteworthy in there. I mean, so in general, with like all the scenes that we get in this book of like these particular characters in the White Tower, I do feel like they could use a little bit of updating. I think what Jordan was trying to do that I appreciate was sort of establish the bonds that are growing between these characters, female friend characters. And, we're starting to get a little bit of a sense that, Egwene hasn't exactly let go of Rand yet, and but Elaine, seems kind of interested. Like there's potential for competition or conflict over a man here. And I think that what Jordan was trying to not do that, right? Like trying to focus on the friendships, and they're building the friendships and not have it be, we might like the same guy. So,
it's a rivalry straight away.
Rivalry. Yeah. And so I appreciate that, because I generally don't enjoy that kind of cliche. But it does seem like maybe it isn't as the way that they're starting to bond with each other so far hasn't been as well developed yet. So might need a little bit.
Yeah, I think as well what he was trying to do with the whole motivation for them leaving the tower as well. It's quite a noble motivation because he's trying to kind of spin that damsel in distress trope, and with this one where it's like Rand is in distress and the
Yeah,
women need to go and save him,
that's true. Yeah,
which is
and
like, which
I
is
think
good.
that can excuse somewhat why they're talking about Rand, and it is, you're right, establishing that like they're all about to make this decision to do something that they know is dangerous because they all want to help him.
Yeah,
And so it is the reversal in that way.
yeah,
These are
which
the
is nice to
knights
see. Yeah,
running off or trying to rescue Rand the
yeah.
damsel.
Yeah, because it's Rand the damsel, yeah, yeah. 'Cause it's nice to see as well, and obviously we know. Well, but we kind of don't know, I suppose, as a reader at this point, because it's a bit of a fuzzy kind of time. What he plays with time quite a lot in this bit as well, because obviously with the trip through the portal stone has taken months, and
Yeah,
at this stage now, we're led to believe like months have also passed, but it's because Egwene talks about how she's not dreaming about Rand anymore, so Rand is probably
exactly.
still in the portal stone at this stage as well. It's kind of a little bit.
That's how I interpret it as well. That the fact that Rand has not appeared in Egwene's dreams for some time, that would line up with the period of time that he has lost through his trip in the portal stone, where he's basically not in that world for some months, and that's why she hasn't been able to dream of him.
Yeah, and then so we kind of know that straight away that when Leandrin comes up and says like they're in trouble, um, we know like, well, how would she know? Because uh, there's we don't know, no one knows where he is, but he is in trouble in a way as well.
Yeah,
So it's kind of a fuzzy one. But and then obviously then she starts talking about the Black Ajah as well, which the girls trust her straight away in it, and she's very very clever when she knows like the pressure points because she obviously knows Nynaeve's character quite well. That she's like if she says that someone from her village is in trouble, she's just going to go and rescue them. So, Chris, how did you, before we get into the Seanchan side of it, because I know Rebecca has a lot of like really great thoughts about the whole. Read this. When I said to you which part of the book would you like to come on talk, you were like,
yeah, yeah.
What? How do you feel about the kind of? Did you think that Leandrin was going to be the Black Ajah from the start? 'Cause obviously, she comes in and talks about it pretty much the first time we meet her. She's talking about the Black Ajah.
No, I don't know if I gave that a second thought in that sense. And especially I think of this like this whole chapter was kind of overshadowed by my disgust for their way that they were talking. So kind of overshadowed. I'm sad to say that it did kind of play into it a lot. But I also did like that. No, there's good stuff here too, and I think the whole thing about going and rescuing Rand is fine. But no, I don't know if I thought about that the end was going to be Black Ajah. I don't.
No, it was a surprise for you,
Yeah,
even though she's so mean and angry all the time.
Yeah.
seems like I get the sense that most of the older Aes Sedai are mean and angry as as approval.
I don't think Leandrin is one of the older, however. I think
Oh
she's
no,
on the younger side of
that's
Aes Sedai.
also
Not to
very.
say that she's young, but on the younger
It,
side, I
it's
believe.
it's sometimes difficult for me to gauge the age of people because Nynaeve will talk like she's in her 40s, but she's actually, or actually even, well, maybe not 40s now because I'm in my 40s myself, so and I don't talk like that. But I mean today, like well, like an ornery old cuss is basically how she talks, which makes her sound a lot older than she is.
Yeah. I think she
So
does try to act older than she is. And
yeah,
Leandrin probably would too, I think. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so so I think that, and I mean, and that in a way is a very good way of playing with the trope because he never really discusses, you know, what what they look like age wise and such, and
True.
in the eye of the world, the boys come off as very very young. They seem like they're like in their early teens. The way they act, what they know, how naive they are. but he never really talks about it extensively. And then then Nynaeve as a juxtaposition to that seems so old
Yeah.
because of the way they act.
He kind of plays with that a little bit in the flicker scene as well, because I remember when I was reading it again this time, there was one line in particular that kind of made me think of you about that how you were saying that, because what Chris often says is that the boys are so naive that it's hard to believe that they're 18, 19, which is because of the background, I suppose, we're in this kind of sheltered world. But there's a line in the flicker scene, the one where Tam gives Rand the letter to get into Ilian's army.
Mm-hmm.
And he says as soon as he gets to Berlin, he's like he gets robbed and gets his letter stolen and almost his sword. And it just shows you that like that would have happened if he wasn't with the people he was traveling with in the Eye of the World, because he is so naive at that stage.
Yeah. It's
So,
that. You're right. They seem younger because of how extremely isolated and naive they are.
yeah. I think with Leandrin as well, I think with her age, I think it's that I think for me, like the Red Ajah always just seem older than
Hmm.
all of the other Ajahs, all the people that are in there. And I don't, this is one of the big things. I think we talked about this on the Dusty Wheel as well, because we were kind of talking about how if we were adapting this, we would do more in this section and the intrigue of the Black Ajah infiltration of
Definitely.
Tower. But I just hope they do something about the Red Ajah in general, because it was never a surprise to me reading, even way back when I read this the first time, that Leandrin was the bad guy, because it was like obviously the bad guys are going to be in the Red Ajah.
She's so antagonistic. Yeah. And I think if anything, you mean maybe he was going for a misdirect, sort of letting us think that the Red Ajah is just, they're all unlikable. They're all like, antagonistic, and maybe that explains Leandrin. And she's one of the first that we really spend any time with.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's what he was going for. But it probably would help to have a more likable member of the Red Ajah be coming to the forefront sooner, because it takes, we haven't seen one yet.
Exactly, yeah. And I feel like the Red Ajah suffers from a Slytherin thing, where it's like, well, of course we're in Slytherin. Of course Lucius Malfoy.
Yes, it's that.
Of
Yeah,
course
it's definitely a Slytherin thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think at this point in this book, it would have been more impactful if Leandrin had been a blue part of the Blue Ajah like Moraine,
Mm,
and I had that juxtaposition of Moraine and Leandrin as being in the same Ajah but different characters. And
yeah.
then if it came, and maybe even if it had someone in the Red Ajah that like Leandrin was kind of like saying, watch this person because this whatever, and it turns out that someone in the Blue Ajah was in the Black Ajah, it would have had more of an impact. Where it's like, wow, literally anyone could be one of them.
Right. Yeah. She was not so surprising to me either, because she had been so antagonistic from the moment we'd met her. So I didn't find it surprising. And it will be interesting to see. I mean, she's still going to be Red Ajah in the show, so they're not changing that. But, I think, they should consider trying to bring in a more likable member of the Red, especially if they're doing like her as part of the Logain storyline, because there should be more Reds involved with that, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And Legane is mentioned a
Yeah,
lot. He's been
I
crying.
was gonna say that it's like they mentioned him in passing, that he's like sitting and drooling in the
Yeah.
Crying, and then he runs away.
it's like feeling because to me he just seems, because I mean the whole thing of being gentle, that just seems like he's like, I know he like loses all his power and all that, but it just feels like they kind of he becomes like this big oaf of some kind that just sits and drools around. That's kind of my vision of him, kind of like he's, otherwise before he was like this powerful swarthy dude
Yeah.
with his shirt open, very much Billy Zane with long flowing hairs, is what I always see.
No, don't mention Billy Zane. No.
Brings to mind all other stuff.
But and then afterwards he's kind of like a Homer Simpson type
Yeah.
figure.
Well, it's kind of
Yeah,
like
I think he's not, I mean, mentally, like in terms of like his mental capacity is the same. I think just picture someone who is like deeply depressed,
yeah,
like deep in depression, and that, you know, they're might be acting like an oaf just because they don't have the will to do otherwise. But mentally, in terms of just his mental acuity, it's the same. But his emotions are.
So like a Billy Zane from The Phantom.
Oh, that's a throwback.
Yeah. Because we talked about this, I think, a few episodes ago, like how gentle it kind of sounds like gelded, I suppose, with a horse, and it's kind of that kind of thing, but they've done it in his brain as well. So it's almost like a mixture between gelding and lobotomizing.
Yeah.
And but what it's done is it's kind of like it's just taken all of his kind of will to live out of him, like he just has no drive anymore, and it's something that gets explored a little bit deeper, I suppose, later on in the series. But I think, because obviously we can talk a little bit about the TV show again, because in this point it's just kind of like he's just thrown in there just to say this person is still around.
Yeah, he still exists.
He still exists. Because obviously in the TV show we know his role is going to be expanded, so you imagine that's going to follow through to season 2 as well. So I wonder if I
was hoping so. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm really interested to see, because I in my head I think that what they might do is they'll have like some kind of. Did you see the Witcher TV show?
No, I actually haven't. And I keep meaning to, but I have so many things on my list that I haven't watched it yet.
There's a really great scene in it where they're showing some kind of voluntary character transformation, I suppose, and it's like an operation kind of thing, and it reminds me of what. And as that's happening, there's something else that keeps cutting away to a different scene where another character's going through some kind of transformation as well. And when I was watching, I was like, this is the perfect way to kind of do the Logain gentling scene, and maybe either one of the healing scenes with Matt, or when the Neve goes through the towers, because it's that kind of thing where someone's being raised up in one hand, and this one is taking someone down to the very base.
Interesting
thing. So I'm really looking forward. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do, because like I think like lots of people really like Logain and the arc that he has, and I think one of the main things that most Wheel of Time fans, when they say what would you like to see of the books that didn't happen, it's like more Logain.
Yeah, definitely seems like we're getting that. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see why that's happening.
Yeah, it's a great thing to compare him to Rand, his journey and everything. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So they go through the ways is the next step anyway.
Yes.
Your favorite mode of transportation?
Which one of us?
The ways.
Which one of us is that?
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ways.
I was looking at you, but I forgot you can't tell that I'm looking at you.
But anyway, well, actually, if it felt like these 2 chapters coming up here, I think we can kind of talk about them like in actually like the rest here. We can basically talk in one long talk, because it's all so intricately interwoven. And what I got, because I picture things, because sometimes when I listen to it, obviously you can see, because I listen to it as well, just to make sure that I get like the names pronounced correctly. Yeah, but even though, and the thing is, like, if the scene before was American high school slumber party, this just feels like all of a sudden we went into Mad Max territory, a German BDSM club in the 1980s. That's what I got in front of me, although basically outside. But I mean, this. I'm struggling to use the right word here. I would like to say that this part made me excited, but I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. Why it got me excited?
Yes,
but
I can see why you say that.
but for the first time, I got really when introduced to something new and different, because this is new and different, and we've seen that quite a bit. This, I felt like this actually like grabbed me. This was exciting to me. Like, oh, these people are interesting.
Well, I know Rebecca's got a lot to say about this section, but I think what it is it's the first. I mean, the Great Hunt does bring in a lot of new things to the Eye of the World, a lot of new concepts, a lot of new grey areas, I suppose, but it's very much a sequel to The Eye of the World until this point. I think this point now it brings something very, very different into it. The series, from this scene onwards, it becomes a lot darker. There's more noise to it. There's more threat because you're introduced to these all-powerful characters, and it's like basically what can defeat them? Well, just other ones that are like them but are stronger, basically. And then you have this new concept that's brought in where they're treated like animals, essentially. And then you have all this whole kind of how you said BDSM kind of thing with it, with the chains and leashes and collars, and it's very like if you were to read like the first, I don't know, suppose the first 6 chapters of The Eye of the World and then came straight to this point, you'd be like, am I reading the same series? Really? But it feels natural though as well. It doesn't feel like it's something that's just kind of come out of nowhere. And I think that's because of the world building, because obviously there's so much talk about like Arthur Hawkwind, and there's so much like news that's always swirling about these people coming out of somewhere and foreshadowing. It feels very much a part of the world, but it just feels like it's to kind of take again a TV rating. It feels like it's kind of gone from PG-13 to R-rated.
We've been getting so many dark hints about the Seanchan this whole book, but this is where like it all comes into focus, and we really like Jordan throws so much at us in that chapter where Egwene is captured, and we really are understanding finally like what's been going on. So I agree, like it's very different, but it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere because of that setup that he's been building into it. But it also makes me realize that like I think The Great Hunt is very high on many Wheel of Time fans like list of rankings of favorite books. For some people it's the top, or it's near the top for a lot of people. And to me, I think that's a lot about the ending, like kind of like that point on through the rest of the book, because it's like the earlier parts are good, but it is more of a typical, plot structure. The Great Hunt is, it is still going into some more familiar tropes, and I think the end is where things start to branch out into something different.
Yeah, because I think again, like one of the criticisms that we had of, I don't think everyone has of Eye of the World, is that the actual, not stakes, but the final bit of the third act, or even actually the third act, it just comes out of nowhere. Really,
yeah.
Like they're in Camlin, and then it's the Eye of the World is mentioned, and Moraine's like, we need to go there, and it's like a breakneck race to get there, and it all happens, and everyone's like, what is happening? Really, just explain it to me like I'm 5. What is happening? And whereas with this one, it feels a lot more organic. I mean, it's similar in its structure, that there is something that has happened, but there's been this build throughout the whole thing where everyone is going to Toman Head. So it's like we know that there's something happening there throughout the whole part of the book, and it comes in around the same stage of the story of like, well, especially with these characters, it's like they're drawn here at a similar stage where the rest of the party is drawn to the Eye of the World in the previous book, but it just feels more earned than it did in that one. So when we talk about the Seanchan and this scene and Egwene's arc now in the next few chapters, I mean, it is kind of like one big long section when she's captured. For you, as like, obviously Chris and I are men, like it's different for us at this stage to kind of look at it, and we can look at it and think of, well, like, that's tough what she's going through, and that's we can see her plight and everything, and we've seen images of like, that kind of thing happening to people. But for you as like as a woman looking at this and thinking that, like, and the thing that makes Egwene something that she's so proud of that throughout this whole book, that she can channel, and that she's different, and she's not so much special, but then she has something that can help people. And I think that's the thing that she talks about quite a lot, is that And even when you look at, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit while I get to the point. When you even look at the Flickr section with Rand, a lot of her parts in that and these alternate realities is her healing people
Mhm.
and using it as a force for good. In this section, she's forced to use this thing as a weapon for the first time and it's really, it comes across that it's the first time she's even ever thought of it, that she could actually use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
How do you feel like when you were reading that when you first read it and now reflecting on that? And I know you've looked into this stage a little bit. How does that kind of speak to you? What is happening and the Seanchan as a people that would treat their
Yeah.
women in this way? Like,
So I think so many things about it, but so I think, as I alluded to before, I think Jordan's throwing a lot at us here in this chapter where we're really coming to understand like how the Seanchan see Damane, how they see women who can channel and how they treat them. And what is really visceral about it, I think, for Egwene and for me as a reader, is that they don't see them as human. They completely believe that they are like animals, and they immediately start treating Egwene that way. And she, is reacting to that. And it's the sort of very systematic dehumanization of people that they have in their control. So that's one part of it that's very visceral for me. And then the other part is, and I think this shows up in other fantasy series that I've read, essentially when you have magic users of any kind who are very powerful and are capable of causing great destruction, you almost inevitably have other people who are afraid of that and try to control it. And there's usually the sort of, as there is here, hypocrisy of, well, these people are dangerous because they can do these dangerous things and we can't trust them to control it, but we're going to control it and that's okay, right? So essentially the Seanchan are like, well, you're too dangerous, to be able to do these things that you can do, but we're going to do it. We're just going to use you and we're going to make that decision. It's okay for me to make the decision to use this magic and however I want to use it, but you can't.
yeah,
And so I see that dehumanization that they do as ultimately it's just exploitative because it's to their huge military and economic advantage to control channelers in this way. And so they have to convince themselves that they're not human because that's how they justified that they get to control that huge source of power.
yeah. And that kind of how you said then about them convincing themselves that what they do is correct. It ties into how there's the bit where Egwene is talking to Min about the wash basin and how was she saying that they cannot use any kind of weapon.
Right.
When she thought about using the wash basin to hit Rena,
She couldn't even touch it. Yeah.
she couldn't clean herself, and she had to convince herself not that she wouldn't hit her with the wash basin, but that she would never even think about considering doing it again, ever again.
Yeah. And it's stuff like that is very striking, how much control this tool, this, item has on a person, that they are physically incapable of doing something because of a thought that
Yeah,
they had.
yeah,
And so it's this just very powerful, in a disturbing kind of way to read these things. And it's another thing that like looms larger in my mind than what is actually on the page. It's kind of like the Flickr scene I think of as longer, more substantial. It's the same thing with Egwene in captivity. I think it goes on longer than it does because it's so potent.
yeah. And it's like it's dealt with in the last 14 chapters of the book as well, and they're not particularly long chapters either. I mean,
And some of those aren't Egwene, like there's they're tangential. So yeah.
But I mean, the interesting is to say is because we talked and just like kind of to interject as being if you look at it from the literary standpoint here, we're seeing that, Robert Jordan goes, we were talking, Eye of the World is very much high fantasy, classic fantasy with the horror elements, which is part of what fantasy is. It's fantasy's background is horror or gothic romance. I mean, that's where it evolved from. So he goes from there, and now he's all of a sudden into. We talked about the possible Lovecraft influence, seeing as he started out writing Conan the Barbarian stories, and Robert E. Howard was very much very much part of that group. But now we're looking at even more Howard influence because it's sword and sorcery all of a sudden.
Mm.
Or would you agree, or am I clutching at?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's more of a kind of there's like what I said before. Up until this point, you've had like Dark Friends, you've had hints of the Black Ajah and hints of the Forsaken, and then you've had the Aes Sedai, and they all use essentially the same thing. And that's that hierarchy where it's like, well, if you're stronger than this other person, or if you're a little bit cleverer than this other person, you'll be okay. You'll be able to use your magic to defeat them. Whereas with this point, it brings in this other society that's like, well, we may not be as powerful as you, but we have something. We have this thing that we can control you with, and then we can use you for our own purposes. And it sets that kind of thing where it's more of it's almost verging towards grimdark fantasy, in a way before grimdark was even a thing, where it is this turning good people into weapons, because we have the example of the two yellow Ajah that are captured as well.
Yeah.
And we hear about their capture. It's not stated explicitly, but when the Ajah who was I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but when she was free and she's captured by her friend who falls to the floor crying that she's a man already. And it's very much then it's brought this whole thing into play where it's like, well, the Aes Sedai aren't infallible and they're not untouchable, which is and it's really an elegant way of doing it as well, because it's not in a way where this does happen in this series. There is power creep in this series with some characters, and by power creep, it's the thing where it's like your characters are just getting more and more and more powerful, and you're having to think of ways as a writer to kind of say, well, I need to limit this power in some way. Some series are better at doing it than others. Off the top of my head, one of the worst ones at doing it is the spin-off series of Raymond E. Feist's Rift War saga with Pug. The first three books, and Thomas, actually, one of the other characters in it, the first three books do it in a very kind of organic way. The power grows, and but then the threat kind of builds with it. And at the end of that trilogy, it's in a good place. But then he comes back to do spin-offs, and each one is like, well, you've got the two most powerful people in the universe, and they're both good people. How do you deal with that in terms of getting a threat and getting a tangible threat and a logical threat in the universe that you've built? And what his way of doing with it was like, I'm going to lock Pug away in a separate dimension for most of this story, right? Or I'm going to something's happened and there's a disease and he can't do this, and he's fine by the end of the book, because what you had these characters that could just literally just turn up and go, okay, this is your problem solved. I've done it. And that's what Robert Jordan avoids at this point here, because he is bringing in more users of the one power all the time. You're reading more about these Aes Sedai. You're reading more about Rand, who is becoming more. He's still like a baby at this point in terms of the one power, but he's each time he uses it, he has the dream sequence with Bowsermon, and Bowsermon is scared of the power that he can use. He hides behind the banner at one point because he's frightened about what he can use. So you're having these characters growing and becoming more powerful, but what he's done is he's just brought in this very, very early on. So it's not like last thing in the series, which some people do. It's very early on in the series where they brought this other society in and said, well, you know what? We may not be as strong as you. We may be regular humans. and what have you, but we can control you, and
Yeah.
we're gonna make you the thing that you fear the most.
The Idom is definitely a threat, and I'd say it's grim dark too, which is the series as a whole is not, but that concept is to me. And the other thing I would mention too, and because I think we see that in these chapters, is that there is a threat or a risk of the one power itself, and I think that plays in with Egwene. You know, she's talking about how she hates being that her power is being used this way, but she can't help that she still wants to touch Saidar, and that is still a real pull for her. And we see it with Rand also, that he vowed to himself at the beginning of the book he wasn't going to touch Saidin, and as the book has gone on, he was very reluctant. He would go out of his way to try to find, other solutions than using the power. And then, but by now he's like almost like getting to the point where he's looking for excuses to use it because it is working on him. And there's always the risk of drawing too much, which Rand, feels himself, getting to that point because he wants it so much.
Yeah, and also though we see that from the flicker scenes, we see for all the characters that are just learning to use this power, that if they don't learn, what's going to happen to them? Like, sickness and wasting and death,
Yeah,
and this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a really like this point in the book, it really kind of just elevates the whole kind of magic system and the stakes of the magic system, I suppose. But the funny thing is about the Seanchan as well, and not about. It was way after I first read these books that I kind of found Robert Jordan's quote about saying that they sound like Texans, which I was like.
They're wranglers. That's what they are. They wrangle people. They round them up.
I really hope they do that in the book, in the TV show. That'd just make me laugh so much. But the thing that's, it's not really funny, but it's like to make the things that control the Aes Sedai, the Aes Sedai have to make it themselves, which is just terrible. Like, and they tell that story about the person who invented it as well. And
that was disturbing.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about quickly heading towards, because I mean, actually, this chapter where we're introduced to them is the longest of the chapters, and then we have like a couple of really quick chapters coming in towards the end here.
Yeah, we're reintroduced to Baal Damon again. There's the little, because it's been a very, very dark section of the book, and even Rand getting to where he needs to go is a dark part of the book with a flicker scene. Then he has the dream about Baalsman again, and then we get just to finish on this little section, we get that little flicker of hope where there may be a plan, and Baal Damon is back.
It's very adventurous kind of thing. It's like an adventure literature. I mean, what I wanted to say before about like the whole sword and sorcery part is that in sword and sorcery, I mean, in true sword and sorcery is always the tool of the villain, because they're not strong enough. They're not muscly and manly enough to use a sword, so they have to use magic. And I think like here the Seanchan is kind of that's their kind of like, they're not strong enough. They have to, or the magic, the people who can use the one power are evil because they're not.
There's definitely an inkling of that in it, but as you'll see sort of towards the end of this book, there's a lot more to the Seanchan than just the magic side of them as well.
So David, what happens next?
What happens next? Yeah. So the Min has been talking to Baal Damon, it turns out, who's itching to get out of he's sick of telling Tarok stories, basically.
Yeah. I would be too.
It was funny. I was reading this. This is the first time I've reread this series since I've become a dad, and like my son is 3 now. And if you mention anything like story wise to him, he's like, "Tell me another story. Tell me something." And that's what. And I was read that line. And I was like, "Man, I am Baal Damon at the moment."
Do you have to tell the same story like 10 times in a row?
No, I have to change it each time.
Oh, okay.
Before bedtime, I have to tell him a train story, and it has to be a different train with a name on it. And it has to be 5 obstacles on the tracks, and every single night the obstacles have to be different obstacles, and there needs to be a different way to get past the obstacles. So he's really testing what I can do. But then, just in general, like we sat there having dinner, and he'll say, "Tell me a story about a little red car." And I'll be like, "Okay, well, I'll start." No, you've told me that one before, and it's like, "Okay." Well. So when I read this bit about Beldamon's just hatred of, not hatred, but just like, listen, I've told him so many stories, I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
It really struck me. I was like, yeah.
I mean, it was a little, fun lightheartedness that I think was necessary here. It was a little bit of a comic relief, and we've talked about that before. That, I mean, Jordan does throw it in every once in a while, and it's nice. It's nice. It's a nice break.
Yeah, I always appreciate that too. That was something I always try to like highlight at the end of my reread videos, because I'd be like talking about like this dark Seanchan stuff. And then I'd be like, I gotta try to find something funny, because he does, and he does really well with the humor, but it's mixed in and into some other really serious stuff.
I think the humor is, like the pot on fame part with him and his bumbling idiots doing stuff, like it's almost like the Three Stooges in a way.
Yeah,
his Trollocs that can't get anything done.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in this book because, like, in Eye of the World, there was more obvious comic relief characters. You had like Tom, you had Matt, you had Loyal to an extent as well. They were more like, you knew that if they were going to open their mouth in some way, there'd be some kind of humor, and Tom in a more kind of cranky way, and Matt in his. But in this book, like, Tom is barely in it. And when he is, he's murdering people or thinking about murdering people. And may well have just murdered the king as well. And then obviously Matt is not in a human kind of state. Yeah, so it is having to like kind of mine comedy from other areas, which is I think you're right, it's a very underrated part of his writing actually, because there is like very laugh out loud moments in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah, you can always find them, and some of it just comes from, you get familiar with these characters, and they may not be trying to be funny, but it's like you understand them in a way that it becomes funny. But usually, there's certain characters that are good for some lightness. Loyal is definitely one. Beldomon always is good for some, some lighter moments. I think Min is pretty good in this book. Like, she can be, lighter, funnier.
Min is one of my favorite characters, and she always has been since I read this the first time. And I'm one of these people that when I first read it, I hated Nynaeve, like, and I was just like, oh, she's just let the boys have fun. But I was a teenager when I read these the first time.
I think that's a common teenage boy reaction to Nynaeve. Yeah.
But like each time I read it through, I like her even more. And like on this, because it's reading it through at the same time with Chris now. She's by far my favorite character.
Yeah. It's true about Nynaeve. I mean, I never disliked her, but I think she's a character that the more you read her, the more you understand her. Like, your appreciation for her grows. So
yeah. And even in this little bit that we're kind of finishing and we're ending on, it's like it's a light-hearted bit, and she's dealing with Beldomon in this kind of like very bolshy kind of way and being very cool. Min's like looking at her and going like, wow, she's so calm, she's good. And then they go around the corner and she like collapses.
I like that too. She's like holding it together, and then she's just like, oh, I can't take it anymore. That was like nice. I like that.
It shows like a nice bit of vulnerability that she actually does have, which like, because we don't see a lot from her POV in the early books, like we do compared to some other characters, but it's only like snippets, especially in the first book. When you go back to read her again and you're seeing her through other people's eyes, you can see that she's always had this vulnerability that she tries to hide from people. I think out of most of the characters, she's the most human of all of the characters.
Yeah, I agree about that. I think when you come to understand that, like, she acts so tough, she tries to act older than she is because she's this very young woman put in a position that like no one expects her to be in that age. And there's a lot of people who don't take her that seriously because she looks so young. And even though she's incredibly skilled, she has all the skills she needs and more, which is why she's in that position. But she has to like be that tough so that people don't treat her like a child.
Yeah, yeah. And then the good thing that Robert Jordan does about that is he even gets it, the response from the male readers is that most of the male characters dislike her at the start, and most of the male readers do, and that's just what happens, and it's just a really sad thing, and it used to happen more in the past, and hopefully we're moving past that now in real life, hopefully. But it was that kind of thing where women that were skilled, and more skilled than men in many ways, were put in these positions, and they had to act in that kind of way to be taken seriously.
Yeah, it's very real. And so I think there's that makes her very relatable. But also, I mean, really, it's just like you come to understand her heart. And when you really get that, like everything she does is about protecting the people that she cares about, that she would literally do anything to protect the people that she cares about. That's it. That's the heart of her. And that's like, you've got to, respect that about her.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do we all come to the end of this journey?
This is the we're
this
right
is the end, right?
This is right near the end of the book. Yeah. Well, what do you think, Chris, is going to happen next? That's what we need to ask at this point.
Well, I think that because now we're in a place where it's. I think I liken it to kind of like where we are in when we get to not the what is it called? Oh, The Empire Strikes Back. Everything's in place, or not. At the end of it, Luke has lost his hand. Han Solo is frozen in carbon. Still don't understand how that happens, but anyway, the Empire is just like they flexed their muscle, and the rebels can't do anything about it. We're on the precipice of either doom or success, and it feels like this is where we are. This is kind of like we're coming up to the climax of the whole thing. We're coming to the turning point. Either there's going to be salvation or there's going to be doom. So I'm feeling like we're going to, knowing that there's a series, I'm thinking we're going to salvation at the end of this book, and they'll just start over in the next book. Whatever they're going to be hunting next time, where they're going to be traveling to in the next book, we'll see. But yeah, no, I'm thinking that we're coming down to like the top of the mountain. Everything is going to turn.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, I do like that sense of everything's converging on this one location. Everyone's basically there now, and it's a combustible situation. So
yeah, definitely. And the great thing about this book, it actually feels like there's a climax, a big climax.
Yes. not like before, where it was just like, was that the climax? Did that just like happen? And
it was a little confusing. Yeah,
it was very, very confusing.
It is. Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on. You'll have to come on again when we're towards the end of the Dragon Reborn, maybe, and we can talk about. Hopefully, by that point, we'll have a trailer or something for the TV show.
Yeah,
we can talk
definitely.
about. We can kind of talk about what they might do in season 2, because obviously you've done some videos on this, and you'd imagine they'll be filming season 2 at that point, and there might be some casting calls to point where we're going.
Are we guaranteed 2 seasons? Is that a guarantee? I mean, seeing has
technically no, but we know that they were given the go ahead to write season 2 quite some time ago now. So it's very likely that season 2 has been written, not filmed, but written. Yeah. And so I'd say it's a virtual guarantee that season 2 will happen. Yeah. Because they gave them a go ahead before, season 1 was anywhere close to being done, to say, yeah, go ahead and write it, so I think
and when it was when shooting season 1 was delayed for the second time in December, like the reports were saying that they're going to come back and finish season 1 when as the film in season 2.
Yeah,
just that Amazon just haven't announced it.
Yeah, I suspect you're right, that I think, assuming that they can keep up with the filming, that it seems likely that they would go on ahead into season 2 and just keep that production going.
Because what I'm kind of like wondering is, like, how do you measure in a day and age when we're doing streaming services? How do you gauge the success? I mean, obviously it's how many views they get in the time, but like, it was one thing when you're looking at ratings and like, well, this episode did, if you look at what like Criminal Minds did, it's like 25 to 30 million people views sitting down and watching it live as it goes on. You know,
there's ways that they measure. I can't remember the name of it now. There's a thing that they can measure with it, and I see it every so often that, like, The Mandalorian was the most watched TV show in the world, and then it was WandaVision, and then it was this and what have you.
Yeah.
It's
Money
actually
Heist was one
Money
recently.
Heist, yeah. I don't know how it is to measure it, but I think one of the things that a big chart of success these days with TV shows is how many memes come out about it. And if there's no memes, like, think of Cursed that came out on Netflix, there was no zeitgeist impact whatsoever. But then you look at, like, The Witcher with Toss a
Yeah.
Coin to The Witcher. You look at The Mandalorian with all the Baby Yoda stuff. The other thing,
WandaVision.
WandaVision, yeah. The other thing that's interesting, and I was going to mention it before, but I forgot, and now I've remembered again, was that with the way that the filming it is, when Rebecca, you were talking about the fan response to it, they're in a kind of a strange way, because, like, we would have, if last year hadn't had happened the way it did, we would have had season one by now, and they would
Yeah.
be filming season two, and they would have had that reaction from the fans where they could either do more things that the fans liked, or even course corrected in some kind of ways. And now
Yeah.
we're in a kind of funny situation where that can't happen until the two seasons are pretty much out. So
Yeah,
it's
that's true. Yeah, they're not going to have an opportunity to gauge a reaction to season one and have it impact season two. It'll be
exactly
season three before they could.
do
I
anything.
But,
think
I mean, to some extent, I think, seeing fan reactions can be helpful, but it's also, I don't know, it's dangerous too, because, I think it's important that someone creating something has a vision.
Mhm.
And that they do keep that in the forefront, and because fans are going to have different opinions,
Yeah.
and you're not going to be able to please everyone, and sometimes there's that vocal minority that is what you hear, but it's not what the majority of fans think, and so
well,
So
there's risk to it too.
it could be a blessing in one side, because you get that unfiltered vision.
Hmm.
But so it's just interesting, because it's not it's an unusual situation for a new TV
True.
show to have that, no one's seen anything of it, and they're already pretty
Yeah.
much back doing the second season
yeah,
pretty much now. Like, and it's like, well, no one's seen any of this thing yet, and we don't know if it's
Yeah.
going to be good.
yeah. No, I mean the thing is that I mean I think what Amazon probably are thinking and probably know, and the producers of the show know, is that you have a lot of old fans. I mean, I've been showing David every once in a while, like, people that show their old Swedish translation of the Wheel of Time, which is called the Tale of the Dragon's Return, is the name
Oh,
of the series. And so if you would translate it into
yeah.
Swedish or into English, just because people knew Lord of the Rings, so they kind of use it, and then that's translated into the Tale of the Lord of the Rings in Swedish.
Yeah.
So they just kind of like felt like, oh, this is a fantasy series, so it'll be the same. So you have a lot of people that are older. I mean, older than we are, that picked the books up when they were first translated or when they first came out, and they probably forgot about them.
Hmm.
There's a lot of lapsed fans I know here in Sweden that say, yeah, I read that, and I read David Eddings, and I read this and that. But it's like that was in my youth, when I just plowed fantasy books like there was no tomorrow, which is a great place to be in when you're a teenager.
It was.
But
That was my teenage years. It's just like, I'm just going to read.
it didn't get us any girls, but but
Girls
unfortunately
are fleeting.
none in my part of the world, at least. But but anyway, but I'm thinking the positive side is that they know that like my friends that loved the Wheel of Time when they were growing up will probably see that it's coming out, and just like, or when it comes out, and just like, yeah, I remember that. I remember reading that. I remember that. Let's check that out. And I think that's a huge positive. The
Yeah.
the negative part of it is that it's on Amazon Prime,
Mm.
and Amazon Prime is not worldwide.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
the same reach as Netflix. It's not even the same reach as Disney Plus or
Mhm.
Mhm.
HBO.
Yeah. But, they're throwing money at it, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think they're going to give it at least? I personally think they'll give it at least 3 seasons to find an audience, because generally with Amazon, like with the stuff that they have brought out, their own things, they give it a chance.
Yeah.
Um,
Man in the High Castle wasn't. I mean, it lost a lot in season 2, so I was actually quite surprised that they chose
yeah,
to finish it off
yeah.
with 3 seasons, right?
5, I think it was.
Was it 5? Really?
4 or 5, yeah. But I think the thing as well, like with Amazon Prime, we'll wrap up after this. But they also have the Lord of the Rings coming as well, so that
Yeah.
they're really going after the fantasy audience.
Right.
Because I think, like the fantasy audience, we like long books, we like series, and we like big TV series too. And it's, we get invested in it. And
Yeah.
Well, I think they're going after the nerds. I mean, if you look at that, they're doing I mean, you're doing The Boys, and The Boys wasn't a very. I mean, it was a very underground comic when it came out, and it was released on Dynamite, who also did The Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
So it's the same publishing company, and Man in the High Castle. So and even other things that they're really gearing into that sphere that hasn't really existed for fantasy science fiction fans. I mean, it was only sci-fi in America, and their production stuff is horrible.
MTV.
And MTV, Shannara, but try to avoid that.
Yeah, but I think it's all about the Game of Thrones phenomenon, because it shows that there's audience out there to be captured, and the people who watch that show were not all fantasy fans in the first place, and
it's not really that much of a fantasy show if you look at it. If you take away dragons, maybe stuff like that.
Yeah, it's more
political.
There's lots more political about it than it's not really about magic necessarily. So I mean, Wheel of Time is certainly a step more in the fantasy direction for sure, a big step. But it's it's more the concept of that kind of a show that stretches those kinds of boundaries and can capture a pretty wide audience and get people talking and become that kind of phenomenon. That's what they're trying to go for,
Yes, fingers crossed that it works. So Rebecca, what's coming up next for you on the channel?
Yeah, so I am definitely doing more discussion of other fantasy adaptations. Like I said, Lord of the Rings, doing a fellowship video that'll come next. I have been binging because there's the Shadow and Bone adaptation that's coming out on Netflix. So I basically binged all the books in that world recently, so I can watch that show and talk about that from an adaptation standpoint, because I think they're really kind of adapting it in a creative way. So I'm excited to talk about that. I'll keep just talking about the Wheel of Time and just how I think certain challenging aspects of it should be adapted, covering the news as it comes out, and kind of getting geared up for hopefully a trailer soon-ish. And basically I want to basically know when this show is coming out, so I can plan when to go back into the Dragon Reborn reread. So that'll be coming sometime, but I'm sort of just mixing in some different things for now. So
sounds awesome, and I'll be watching as always. Really,
will you be doing the Shannara adaptation or
so to be honest, I am focusing more on what I think are good adaptations.
Okay.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, because I thought about it and it's well, I could, because I am not a fan of the Hobbit movies, and I could talk about that and what went wrong, but I'm but it's not as applicable really. Honestly, I want to talk more about good adaptations and the things that maybe were good choices and not good choices. But so I also want to talk about things that are topical too. So that's why I was reading all the Shadow and Bone books, because that's coming out. I'm also watching / reading The Expanse, because I want to talk about that from an adaptation standpoint. So, and then there's Lord of the Rings, and I'm sure I'm going to cover the Hunger Games at some point too, because I thought those were good adaptations as well.
Dragonlance, that movie, stay away from it.
I have not seen that. But yeah, so there's a lot of bad adaptations out there, and I'm kind of hesitant to talk about bad adaptations as much, but maybe at some point I'll just do a bad adaptations video, and just
you can do the whole just one and talk about the top 10 worst
top 10 terrible adaptations. That might be fun. I could do that. Yeah.
That's a really novel way of actually doing that. I'll actually talk about the good ones because most people would just go, "These are the bad ones," and then
Yeah, and there's tons. There's so many bad examples. So there's like easy pickings there, but it's not as instructive, right? I mean, in some ways. So
really, what it ends up being is like you'll become like if you do that, like just talk about bad adaptations, you'll become basically a smaller version of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
which could be fun.
But, and they're coming back. They're coming back.
They never need to go away. Some things never die. Mystery Science Theater is one.
Yeah,
Weird Al
is
another.
They're doing their own app actually to show their new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's it for this time. David, do you have anything you want to shill?
Nothing I want to show. No, but I have. In Solitude Shadow is out on the 4th of June. Talking of fantasy adaptations and stuff. Maybe one day someone will be doing a bad adaptation of that. Let's hope not. Let's hope
they do a bad adaptation.
I just finished the last edits on it last night, so I got a lovely note from my editor saying about a section that made her cry on the first time and made her cry even more on the second time.
Oh,
which went
awesome.
That's great because it was a part that's supposed to make people cry.
It was supposed to be funny.
Yeah, it's like this is supposed to be a happy moment. No, it was it's supposed to be. So no, that's great. So that's finished. It's out on the 4th of June. Very excited about that. If you're on my newsletter, I'll be giving away some review copies of it pretty soon. I think maybe next month, and then that's it. So really excited about that. There is a huge. Obviously, I'm a big Wheel of Time fan. It's different to the Wheel of Time. It's not carbon copy or anything, but if you're a fan of the Wheel of Time and you read it, you will see some little names or little kind of like influences here and there because it's my favorite series, so I had to put them in there. But no, that's it. So yeah, I had a little drink to celebrate last night.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
perfect.
Thank you both for having me. It was lots of fun.
We'll hope to have you on again, and I guess I'll let you take this one this time.
Until the next turning of the wheel.
Exactly. Have a good day.
Bye.